welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. We are here answering your questions about politics today. So if you got any questions about politics, just let me know in the chat, and I will do my best to give you a good answer. I know that politics is particularly weird these days, and so there's a lot to try to figure out about what is actually going on. There's a lot of misinformation and propaganda that needs to be addressed. JP says, "Ha! I knew you would be early." Well, I always am, JP. We got a real what do you call it? We got a real Sherlock Holmes on our case here. So yeah, if anybody's got any questions about politics, just let me know in the chats, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or something else. There's not going to be any fighting here on the show. I don't get into it with people. This is not a debate show. This is just a show for good faith questions about politics and good faith answers in response. So, yeah, let me know what your questions are in the chat, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good Tuesday today. And you're not letting the news get you too down, not getting too upset about things that are going on in the world. So maybe you can pop in to ask me anything about politics and ask your questions, and then you won't have to do so much stressing out about all the things that are going on in the world. So you know I know that there's a lot of shows out there. They talk about politics and then they debate people, and then those people get into big old fights with each other, and they call each other names, and they call each other stupid, and everybody's trying to own each other. That is not what happens on this show. This show is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. Maybe you are somebody on the right and you've always wanted to know what is the deal with people on the left. You got a real life Democrat here. I can answer all those questions for you. JP says, I recall the two-term limit being a gray area as taking office midterm is unclear, but isn't Trump ineligible for 2028? Yes, the Constitution is not subtle about this. He is not allowed, he is not permitted under the law to run for a third term. That's not going to stop him from trying, of course, but if we're going by strict constitutionality, then no, he cannot run for a third term. He cannot even run as vice president under JD Vance or whatever. Sir Squintalot says, "Do you think women should be drafted into non-combat roles?" I think women should be. I don't think anybody should be drafted, but I think if people would like to serve, then they can serve in whatever roles they are qualified for. 1974 Ford Pinto wagon says they're going to do it regardless. Yeah, he's going to try, but I don't think he's going to get away with it because people like you and me are going to do the work of stopping him. Okay, JP says Trump has shown 2028 merch unconstitutional for him to run. Yes, 100%. Again, he's going to try, but whether or not he's successful is completely up to us. Excellent questions at the start of the show, everybody. So, Daniel D says, "How much for a date, Jared?" I don't. Unfortunately, I don't do that kind of thing. I don't really need the money, and also my wife would be really upset about that. Let's see here. 1974 Ford Pinto wagon says he gets away with everything. So Donald Trump does have a history of getting away with a lot of things, but he doesn't get away with everything. I think that's really important. He is vulnerable to legal consequences. The problem is that he has a lot of money and power behind him trying to shield him from legal liability. But it is completely up to us. We can get him out of office by replacing every Republican in office with a Democrat, and then we can put political pressure on those Democrats to make sure that the people involved with the Trump administration suffered legal consequences for all of their illegal activity. 1974 says he won't face justice for anything. The only way that he's not going to face justice is number one, if he dies, or number two, people like you and me do not do the work of unelecting Republicans, replacing them with Democrats, and getting him out of office. At the end of 2028. Those are the only ways that they can avoid it. But if we do the work of making sure that he's held accountable, then he will be held accountable. Let's see here. Fletch Lives Again says, thoughts on Trump bragging about passing his IQ dementia test? Seems like a low IQ dementia thing. I mean, he just brags about everything. He takes a successful step and he goes, oh my God, all my doctors are saying that's the greatest step a human being has ever taken. And, my wife, Melania, looked at how I tied my shoes this morning and she said, oh my God, you're a genius. You're the Picasso of tying your shoes. And then I ate an egg, and the chef was like, "Good Lord, I've never seen anybody eat an egg like that. That's incredible, you know? That's way better than how Obama used to eat eggs and Biden. Oh my God, don't get me started on how bad Biden was at all of that stuff, you know?" So yeah, he's an idiot. He brags about shit. He's stupid. You know, what are you gonna do? Jacob Cass says, "How do I navigate a society run by Zionists?" I would encourage you to not use that word anymore, not because it's offensive at all, but just because nobody agrees on what it means. You know, like I don't even know what you mean by a Zionist. You could be from on either side of the political spectrum here, arguing that Zionists are bad. You know. Okay, Marine Tatted King says, "Why does America citizens have to care about what happens in Gaza when other countries don't care?" So other countries do care, Marine Tatted King, and there's sort of like the moral argument, which is like we should not be either allowing or assisting in atrocities that are happening anywhere, you know, including Gaza, because it's not just that it's happening and we are not doing anything to stop it; it's that we are actively assisting Israel in perpetuating their atrocities. But there's also a much more logistical argument, which is that suffering, turmoil, war, G-side, war crimes, that stuff is not in America yet, but there are knock-on effects to that stuff happening that can and usually do get to America eventually in one way or the other. And so it's the morally right thing to do. It's the right thing for national security. It's the right thing for the health of the globe. So yeah, we should be trying to do that. Marine Tatted King says they don't care about American citizens. No, they don't. I mean, I think that they care that American citizens are funding the bombs that are killing their children. You know. RJS says they have technology that can manipulate anything and it's in the wrong hands. I don't really know what you mean by that. Voodoo Witch says, "What do you think of the confirmation of New York Mayor and Mike Johnson's statement?" Well, I mean, the election is happening today, right? So we don't know. I mean, it looks like Mom Donnie's going to win, but I don't think we know for a fact, you know. But also, Mike Johnson, he's you know not a great guy, Mike Johnson. Poolhan Luke says Trump has done real well in Asia. I mean, he's done well for Asia. You know, he's basically giving them the globe. Let's see here. Marine Teddy King says, "So we fund other countries for nothing." Sure, great. Are you mad about Argentina, Marine Teddy King? Are you mad about the $40 billion that Trump is sending to Argentina? Is that what you're referring to when you say, "So we fund other countries for nothing"? Sure, great. Let's see here. High on Dopamine says, "If the fighters wear civilian clothes, there's going to be civilian casualties." Are you talking about Gaza? High on Dopamine? Because the Israeli army has been murdering people who are not in, what do you call it? You're saying that the fighters wear civilian clothes, so Israel has no choice but to kill civilians. I thought you were saying the opposite thing, but that's not like that doesn't adhere to the international rules of war. If the bad guys are wearing civilian clothing, that does not give you license to murder civilians. That's not how that works. Okay, Waxy says the children who were sniped in the head and doctors too. He's talking about the children and calling them fighters. Yeah, I don't think that's a person who's here in good faith. Marie Teta King says, "What does sending money for Haiti workers do for them or us?" Seems, I mean, that Trump is sending 40 billion to Argentina, right? Marine Teta King, that's what I'm referring to. Walker Max says, "Would you vote for someone who has their campaign funded by APAC?" So I do not view my preferred politician would be somebody who doesn't take any lobbyist money. So whether that's Heritage or Federalist Society or APAC, but I also understand the realities of running for office, and it's very expensive. And so I do not view taking that money as a as a deal breaker. But if I'm voting in a primary and I got one of those guys, one of those politicians is taking money from APAC and one isn't, then the one who isn't gets a little bit of a leg up in my eyes. If both political parties are taking APAC money, I will still vote for the Democrat taking APAC money over the Republican taking APAC money for a million reasons. Poolhan Luke says Trump has stumped Xi. Trump outplayed him. Yeah, no, that's not accurate at all. Poolhan Luke, you're about to get booted from my live stream because you're not asking questions and you're saying things that are untrue. But just in case, just in the off chance that there's some brain cell that you have that is listening to me, uh, Trump has empowered China to basically take over the globe. They have given them the world economy. They have given them the world's diplomacy. China now has advantages in in basically every strategic category, thanks to insanely stupid foreign policy by the Trump administration and the stupid fucking tariff war. Let's see here. Poolhand Luke says that's false. Where did you get your info from the news? All right, we're gonna see you later. Let's see here. China owns more land in California than California does. I don't know if that's true, Marine Tatted King. Unrecognizable says W. Maybe China will definitely better. Don't maybe China will do better. I mean, yeah, I don't know. What are we talking about here today, guys? Good lord. Good hello, Ecuadorian baseball pitcher. Good to see you again. JP says, as a veteran, women can serve anywhere. It's all about personal skill and temperament. Completely agree with that. Thomas Jerome Newton says, there's no right, no left. It's systematically designed to do exactly what it's doing. Do you agree? No, Thomas Jerome. There are massively different outcomes on both the state and federal level, depending on who is in charge. So this uniparty theory, this like theater of politics theory, it completely falls apart on its face. There are people who are alive today because of the Affordable Care Act, which is only possible because people voted for Democrats. And there are women today who are dead because of abortion bans that were only possible because people voted for Republicans. Kaz808 says, what are your thoughts on Myron Gaines? I don't know who that is. Unrecognizable says, maybe America as a superpower is the problem. I mean, you know, maybe any single nation being the only nation that makes decisions is bad. But, you know, I'm not saying that America is flawless. You know, I'm not going to say it's a good thing that Donald Trump is giving the world to China. Unrecognizable. I already did that one. Texmo Bowl King says, does my single vote really matter? Yes, it does, Texmo Bowl King. Yes, it does. And if it didn't matter, then the Republican Party would not be working their asses off to make you think that your vote does not matter. Okay, let's see here. Dan O Phantom says, skip my question. Well, I'm going to scroll up and see if we can find it. Texmo Bowl King says, I think both the left and right are terrible. I mean, I think that the right is a lot worse than the left. And I would love to engage with you on that, Texmo. So if you can tell me why you think the left and the right are equally terrible, I will hear that argument. But I pay attention to this stuff pretty carefully, and it seems obvious that the right is like way, way, way worse than the left. ZZ Tesla says, why do you think Trump pardoned Santos? I have no idea. It might have been a bribe. It might have been just George Santos saying nice things about Trump. Trump loves getting his ass kicked, you know, shit like that. Ready. Marine Tatted King says, no, that was Biden. Nope. I don't know what you're referring to, but I'm pretty confident that that is not a real thing. Jack Jack says, should we lower the age to serve in our military? I don't think so. 18 seems like a pretty good number to me. Okay. Texmo Bull King says, I've been on this earth for 45 years, and it seems like nothing changes regardless of who is in charge. Okay, Texmo Bull King. Well, let me put this into your noodle. Let me ask you this and tell me what you think about this. And you may have heard this already because I literally just said it, but there are people alive today because of the Affordable Care Act, which is only possible because people voted for Democrats. And there are women today who are dead because of abortion bans that were only possible because people voted for Republicans. So when you say you've been on this earth for 45 years and it seems like nothing changes regardless, those are two like massive examples of things changing. So I guess I would ask you, because I'm 46, so like we're peers, right? I have seen things change. I have actively seen things change. Do you agree with me that my two examples, at least, are things that have changed? Texmo Bull King says both of those things did not affect me. Okay. I mean, I would argue that maybe they had because maybe there's some knock-on effects, like maybe you paid less in insurance than you would have because of the Affordable Care Act and stuff like that. But even if it's true that those things did not affect you, do you not argue? Do you not believe that those things affected a lot of people? So those people's lives were definitely changed by who was in charge, right? Miss Originality says, you have fickle morals if you need to experience pain to care. You know, Miss Originality, I don't disagree with that, but I'm also trying to, you know, encourage this Texmo Bowl fella to engage on the substance. So I'm not going to throw aspersions on him. for for having that ideology that if it didn't happen to me, it didn't happen. Sabrina says everyone says Obama made healthcare unaffordable with the Affordable Care Act. What's up with that? So that's inaccurate. Obama made healthcare more affordable, but healthcare is still unaffordable. Texmo says humans tend to not care about things that do not affect them. All right, but again, Texmo Bull King, like, what do you think about the two examples that I gave you? I know that they didn't affect you, but we can agree that those are two huge changes depending on who's in charge, right? Okay. 2B God says opinions on Marx. He's fine. Had some pretty good ideas, I think. Reba says, what rights do you think they'll come for next after LGBTQ marriage? Probably mixed race marriage, probably like due process, probably the right to vote, stuff like that. Okay, Mr. Originality says in 2020 all the way to 2024, my healthcare was 1/3 of what it was before. I don't know. Healthcare is 1/3 of what it was before. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Heather D926 says, I'm 34, the last 7 months have been the worst. Never struggled like this in every way. I feel you, Heather. Like, I am struggling too. This is part of the reason why I did so much work to elect Democrats and Kamala Harris instead, because I knew that this was going to happen, Okay, Texmo says, I think healthcare should be free for all. I completely agree with that. And the Democratic Party believes that also. The Republican Party is trying to make healthcare more expensive. Do you not agree with that, Texmo Bull King? My healthcare has doubled since the Affordable Care Act. Maybe no correlation. Yeah, possibly. Possibly no correlation. Eric says, are paid higher healthcare because of Obama? No, that is inaccurate. Kids and 81 says, Medicaid cuts coming. I have metastatic cancer, barely made the cut. I'm probably about to die. I'm really sorry to hear that. KDs and 81. Gaelic Girl says, universal healthcare is long overdue in the US. I completely agree with that. Reba says, what's your opinion on Project 2025? It's terrible. They're doing it. They said they weren't going to do it, but they're doing it. And everybody who's paying attention, like me, was saying it's obvious that you're going to do it. And then they were going, no, we're not going to do it. And then Trump won the election, and then they were all like, we're doing it. Ha ha, tricked you, you fucking suckers. And yet these guys still have like a 41% approval rating. It should be 0. Jet Joey02 says Democrats and Republicans are funded by the same people. This isn't a left versus right war. So you're half right, Joe T. It is true that there are people on both sides of the aisle who get funding from the billionaire class and lobbying organizations, etc. But there is a massive difference between the two political parties. What I will agree with you on is that it is not the voters against each other. It is the billionaire class against the working class. But the Republican Party is working with the billionaire class to enact their agenda. And the Democratic Party, as flawed as it is standing up to the billionaire class. So that's why I advocate for people to support the Democratic Party over the Republican Party. Rebel says they're funded by the same people, but one side more than other for sure. Accurate. RX Ponder says thoughts on insider trading concerns. The Republicans are in charge of the government right now. Josh Hawley has a bill to stop insider trading in government that has a carve out in it for Donald Trump to continue doing insider trading. So why aren't they passing the bill? It's not Democrats that are standing in the way. Democrats have signed on to that bill. Republicans are in complete control of the government right now. They could pass that bill tomorrow if they wanted, but they're not because they think that that's fine. Okay, Joe TO2 says the billionaires are all Democrats, though. Like 80% of them? No, that is inaccurate, Joette. 75% of all billionaire political donations go to the Republican Party. Donald Trump has more billionaires in his cabinet than any president in history. The platform of the Republican Party is to cut taxes for billionaires, so it makes sense that the billionaires would be supporting Republicans over both parties. Okay, Reba says, how long do you think the shutdown will last? I don't think anybody can make that prediction, Reba. And political predictions are not worth the paper that they are printed on. Kimberlina says, what's up with Hawley's proposal to fund SNAP? I don't know about it. I need to look that up. Baby Toes Johnson says, abolish the income tax. I don't think we should do that. I think we should increase taxes on the rich. Danny is Terrible says, how can we ever know what the privatizations for a ballroom will affect us? It's going to be difficult because the Trump administration is very not clear. There's not a lot of transparency in the Trump administration. So, yeah, we're just going to have to hope that reporters are doing really good work on following the money trail between, billionaires giving Trump a bunch of money to build a stupid fucking Saddam's palace style golden ballroom while people are suffering to put food on the table. and political favors that those billionaires then get from the Trump administration. Joette says, keep blaming Trump and not Netanyahu, who's been controlling our country for 30 years. Joette, you are in danger of getting blocked because I do not allow for that kind of nonsense on my live stream. You are saying that Trump gets absolutely no blame for the shit that he has done because you believe that Netanyahu has secretly been controlling this country for 30 years. That is unbelievable bullshit. And if you keep on saying shit like that, you're out of here. Race Bannon says, why don't Democrats just vote for the CR the same when they did 13 times? Race, the reason why Democrats aren't is because if the Republican continuing resolution is passed, that means that all of our health insurance costs are going to skyrocket. And the Democrats are trying to get the Republicans to stop that from happening. And the Republicans are saying, no, we're going to let that happen. And if you don't let us make that happen, then we are going to hurt every other American by shutting the government down. Okay, Joette says, not secret, LOL, APAC Liberty funds all but 9 of our politicians. You were warned, Joette. Congratulations. See you later. Okay, Race Bannon says the subsidies need to go away. But the subsidies are keeping all of our healthcare costs down, Race. It doesn't really seem like you, I'm just going to stop that sentence right there. B says, how'd you feel about Trump? He's a massive piece of shit. He's stupid. He's incompetent. He's a bad president. Rebel says, health insurance is expensive enough. If the ACA subsidies expire, prices will triple for some. That is accurate. MC Spike says they voted for it the first time because Republicans promised to work with him on healthcare. I believe that's accurate. I think some of them were also worried about what Trump would do during a government shutdown, and a lot of those fears have been proven correct, in this shutdown. King Desert Lona says, are you a fan of Senator Lisa Blunt Rochester? I unfortunately don't know enough about her to comment on it. Ecuadorian baseball pitcher says, what is your thoughts on the 6'7" trend going around? Kids, they latch on to silly memes. They like having their own language. It's a funny, silly thing. What are you going to do? Tyro Pillar says, Republican rep could have died when she needed an abortion because of her vote stance on abortion. Ain't no way you can believe voting doesn't matter. That is accurate, 100%. Amanda Ending says, Trump's doing amazing things for the country. That is inaccurate. That's also not a question, so you're out of here. Baby Toes Johnson says, taxes are theft. That is also some right-wing billionaire propaganda, so you're out of here, too. Waxy says, we are just like Germany in World War II. Putting Kamala in office wouldn't put a stop to the genocide we fund. Yes, it would have, Waxy. The Harris administration and her team were clear about this, that they were going to be putting pressure on Netanyahu to stop doing war crimes and genocide on the people of Palestine. The Trump administration is encouraging it. They are encouraging ethnic cleansing for Palestine. So they would have been doing a lot better under Harris. I think that is obviously clear. Joe Padilla says, does no King's Day gatherings actually do anything? Yes, they do, Joe Padilla, but they don't do everything. So we need to do other things instead. In addition, we need to protest, but we also need to strike and boycott and put pressure on elected representatives and business owners. We need to organize and recruit and convince and volunteer. Like, there's a bunch of things that we need to do. Okay, Doug Wilt says there's no king. But Trump is trying to be a king, Doug. That's what the protest was about. Race Bannon says Obamacare is failing. Any program that needs subsidies is a bad system. No, that's just the definition of a program, Race, and you are out of here. Boy, oh boy, is my patience on the floor today. T Vibes 3.0 says that's not true. The Biden administration ran on Israel has the right to defend itself. Yes, but there's a difference between Israel has a right to defend itself and Israel has the right to annex territory and ethnically cleanse Palestine. The Biden administration did not do good in Gaza during their time in office. That is true. No one's arguing that. But Biden was better on this issue than Trump is. And that's not saying that Biden was good. That is just saying that Trump is a lot worse than Biden. It is a lot worse to not sanction illegal West Bank settlements. Biden sanctioned them. Trump didn't. It is worse to allow Netanyahu to have 2,000-pound bombs. Biden stopped sending him 2,000-pound bombs. Trump restarted sending him 2,000-pound bombs. And Trump has been openly advocating for ethnically cleansing Palestine so that he can build a fucking Mar-a-Lago over there. Kamala would have been better on this than Biden, and Biden was better on this than Trump. Ergo, Kamala would have been better on this than Trump currently is. Thank you, Sonia. I appreciate you being here. Let's see here. Doug Wilt says, even CNN doesn't lie this much. Well, CNN and I both don't lie, so you are out of here. Sabrina says, why didn't the Democrats make the Affordable Care Act subsidies permanent before Trump got into office. So, Sabrina, it's a difficult question to answer. When so Democrats only had 60 votes in the Senate when they passed the Affordable Care Act. And so they needed to make that piece of legislation watered down enough to make the most centrist right-wing Democrats happy. So the most right-wing senator that we had at the time was named Joe Lieberman. He was an independent who would caucus with the Democrats. And he personally got rid of things like a public option because he didn't like them. And we needed his vote. So we made those concessions for him. One of the concessions that is regularly put into bills like this in order to appease fiscal hawks and independents like Joe Lieberman is that you have to constantly be reaffirming funding for the program as a way of saying, like, we're going to try this, and if it works, we're going to keep doing it, but if it doesn't, then we won't keep doing it. That's like, it's compromise, basically. Let's see here. Waxy says, we know her APAC record. Yeah, lots of politicians take APAC money. APAC money is very useful if you would like to win your election. So I don't care for that narrative that APAC money is like this black check mark that means that you're like an evil person. It means that those people are living in the political reality of APAC being able to either win you or lose your primary election. Now, do I think that's good? Absolutely not. Do I think we should get rid of all lobbying, including APAC and the Heritage and fucking Federalist Society? Absolutely. But the people that demand Democrats to be 100% perfect on all these issues are not taking into consideration the political realities of needing money and not needing to piss off extremely powerful organizations to lose you your primaries. The fucking road is littered with the bodies of Democrats that have stood up to APAC and then lost their elections. So, until the American people prove to APAC that they cannot lose politicians their elections, APAC is going to continue losing politicians their elections. Okay, Straw Hat Robot says, why is the right's platform about spreading hate and control? When did that start? It's been a slow decline into madness, I would argue, ever since Nixon. So yeah, there we go. John Abbott says, pretending that Kamala would have been as bad as Trump is like insisting that a stab wound in the stomach is as bad as a toddler kicking you in the shin. That is accurate, John Abbott. Okay, thank you, Sun Wallflower. I don't know if my regulars can tell, but I'm a little, what do you call it, prickly today. Among Lama says, and Kamala took a lot of heat when she said she would be harsher on Netanyahu. That is accurate. Among Lama says, literally can't win with these people. Among Lama, it is important to recognize that most of these people are not real, that a lot of them are bots or paid actors or whatever. Or they are people that were tricked by bots and paid actors and propaganda and misinformation. And so it does not do any good to assume that those are real people on the other end of those electrons. And so I need to remind myself, as I am reminding everybody else, that we need to be patient with the bots and be cool people. Joe Padilla says, should we start prepping because food prices are going up? That's a good question. I don't know what the value of it is. I don't know if you're in a financial position now to afford to stockpile food so that you are not hit by rising food costs in 5 months or so. So it's like, seems like kind of a personal decision, At some point, you're going to have to go outside and buy food again. And then those prices will be higher, when you do. So it's like, let's see here. Okay. Italiana says, feeling good about voting on 50. I love my state, California. Excellent, Italiana. Joe Padilla, thank you for the roses. Appreciate that. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, JP12 Real says, why are APAC money and Elon Musk millions illegal vote lottery the same? Hey, I'm a cowboy. That's pretty cool. Hey, I made my goal. Thank you so much, everybody, for helping me achieve it. Yeah, JP, I'm still trying to figure out what that question means. Why are APAC money and Elon Musk million illegal vote lottery the same? Why are APAC money and Elon Musk's illegal vote lottery the same? I don't know if they are the same, actually. What Elon was doing was like, unequivocally illegal. Um, and APAC, I don't love them, but they are basically adhering to the letter of the law. So yeah, I don't know, man. Waxy says APAC money is direct funding on behalf of a genocidal foreign entity. It's not, though. It comes from American billionaires. So sorry, buddy. Sorry, Waxy. Mark's Taz says the Trump MRI leak seems off, like they're hiding something. Yeah, probably. He's probably less healthy than he's trying to make it seem like he is, but I also don't think that he is so unhealthy that we are going to be rid of him anytime soon, and we should just continue. We should continue fighting as though he is going to be here for 1,000 years. Verifies TTV says, "Good luck to you in your junior journey in commentating. I am curious, do you have any leanings?" Yes, I am a progressive Democrat. Okay, JP says Trump gets no blame for an illegal lottery for election, and Dems get hate for APAC money. Not the same. Completely agree with that. JPX Real. Sabrina says, "How can people really believe that Democrats give free healthcare to undocumented immigrants? Propaganda and misinformation is a hell of a drug." Sabrina. Let's see here. All right, and I made my goal again. You guys are so sweet, Joe and Taliana and Lindsay. I really appreciate you guys helping me meet my goals here. I heard that meeting the goals and then setting up new goals is really good for the algorithm. And so, um, I appreciate y'all helping me do this work, that I'm doing. Okay, so let's see here. Joe Padilla, thank you, my man. I'm sure you're as smart as me. Turtle and a Half Shell says carp. Don't know what that means. Peter Thiel and Alex Karp are the ones to watch. They're the puppet masters. That's relatively accurate. K2 says thoughts on Bernie's immigration stance. I haven't heard anything that Bernie has said recently about immigration, but I like Bernie, so I'm sure it's pretty good. Joe Padilla says, "Don't be silly. I'm a truck driver. Truck drivers can be smart." Joe Padilla, I'll bet you're a very smart person. Among Llama says, what you should be asking yourselves, what happened to September's jobs report? It was already done before the shutdown, by the way. Yeah, the Trump administration is hiding relevant information from the American people that makes it clear that they are doing a bad job. End of story. Layoffs on the horizons. That's why they are trying to distract you. That is also accurate. Kimberlina says, "Can we make Marionette Mike a thing? He even looks like one." I mean, we can all do our silly, nicknames and stuff, and calling it the Big Ugly Bill, or calling it the fellow with the island ballroom, stuff like that. I don't know how much that stuff pushes the needle, but if it's fun for you, then I say go for it. Italiana says, "You're welcome. If we could educate one person, I'm happy, and go Dodgers." Yeah, go Otani, man. He's killing it. Forge Betting says, "Rothschilds are the biggest threat to our country and the world." That honestly sounds like some anti-Semitic propaganda, Forge Betting. So ask a question or you're going to get out of here. Scott Clower says, "The Stormy Ballroom is pretty funny." Among Llama says, "We will likely never know the actual cost." That is accurate because the Trump administration loves shredding documents and hiding shit from the American people. Okay. All right. Comments have really slowed down. JP says, "It's like Ratatouille. Not every truck driver is smart, but any truck driver could be smart." Yeah. I didn't. Is that in Ratatouille? I didn't know that. JKLBNM says, "Can you explain socialism?" Absolutely. So socialism is basically, we all give the government money via our taxes, and then the government uses that money to pay for things that help all of us out. That's basically what socialism is. Public school, the post office, the military, fire departments, police, all of that are socialist programs where we are all kicking money in. When you are living in an apartment with like 5 other people and everybody kicks in money for the electric bill and for cable, that's socialism. Okay, Kimberly says, "Do you think Republicans will pull the filibuster and pass without the majority?" No, I do not think they're going to do that. If they did that, then it would prove to people that they could have done that a long time ago. That's number one. Number two is they still believe that hurting Americans is going to hurt the Democrats more than it's going to hurt them. So they're just going to continue hammering it and saying this is Democrat shutdown and lying about not seating people because of the fellow with the island files and stuff like that. Let's say here. Joe Padilla says, "What's with the fellow with the Island Files? I haven't heard much about it lately." So I believe it's Senator Gallego who is out there basically just saying like Mike Johnson is covering for PDF files because he won't seat the last House member from Arizona because she represents the last vote for getting the fellow with the Island Files, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, there are people out there still banging that drum, but until the government is reopened, I don't know if there's any way that we can force Mike Johnson to hold that vote or to sit that what do you call it, to sit that House member. But political pressure works. So if you live in Mike Johnson's district and you can make his life hell until he seats that representative from Arizona, I say be my guest. North Carolina Wildflower says, "Will ACA subsidies end anyway at some point?" I'm not sure how it's written into the legislation. I believe potentially there's like an automatic renewal period, or the Big Beautiful Bill specifically defunds the Affordable Care Act subsidies, or they just expire like every 5 years. They need to be re-upped or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, they shouldn't end. Like that is until we have universal health care, we should not get rid of the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Sonia Boss, the Secretary of Agriculture, claims Dems are the reason for the shutdown. Why? Because they're liars. Because the people that are in government right now were put there by Donald Trump because they are willing to lie for him and break the law for him and do unconstitutional and barbaric things in his name. Andrew says, "So does that mean the government will never reopen because seating her and forcing the vote will be inevitable?" Um, I wouldn't say that, Andrew, because I do believe that political pressure will eventually get the government back open. Um, Now it's kind of a weird legal question whether or not Mike Johnson can be forced to sit that representative, or if he can just delay forever. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I've heard very smart people talk about how it is a precarious legal situation where if the state of Arizona loses that lawsuit, then that's technically precedent for not seating anybody in the other party, if you're in charge. Among Llama says Republicans have only worked 20 days out of the last 3 months. That is accurate. All right. Let's see here. Amon Lama says, "Did you hear Mike Johnson claiming he was overworked?" I did. He is a liar. All right. Verifies TTV says, "Thoughts on the conflict in Palestine?" So, um, for a long time, Israel has been mistreating the people of Palestine, and it has made the people of Palestine very angry. And so they have empowered a terrorist organization called Hamas to try to fight back against Israel. And Hamas has done war crimes against the people of Israel, and then Israel did war crimes back against the people of Palestine. So I am for the citizens of both of those countries, and I am against the governing bodies of both of those countries. I think it's fucking rich that the Trump administration keeps on claiming that that is a war that is over when Netanyahu is currently working on new strikes for Gaza. Okay, JP says, "I'm thinking of that movie with Chuck Norris fighting a small, corrupt town." Right? Is that? I don't know. I'm unfamiliar with Chuck Norris's filmography, so he could have a movie called Ratatouille. I don't know. Among Llama says, "We have been severely underreacting since January 6th. Completely agree with that. Poof. What we've been underreacting for Republicans, but overreacting for Democrats. Everything that Democrats do is a mistake that we need to yell and scream our heads off. Even to do things that are good wasn't good enough, or it wasn't soon enough to count as a good thing." Alrighty, let's see here. Shell Bell says, "Comments, thoughts on DOJ monitoring state elections this year?" So it's obviously extremely concerning. I don't know how far the Trump administration is going to try to push things. I am skeptical that they will have any effect on the election that's happening today, but I am worried that they are sort of like putting feelers out there to see what they can get away with in 2026 next year. But yeah, it is an intimidation tactic, or it is, are we stealing ballot boxes? Are we literally, commandeering, ballot boxes so that those votes can't be counted by people in blue states? Like I don't know, man. Is ICE going to be there arresting people that they think are Democrats? I don't know. I don't know, but it is a massive concern, and it is a violation, and we should not stand for it. Turtle and a Half Shell says, "Have you seen the journalist on here named Dre talking about Neuralink?" No, I have not. Shell Bell says, "I'm in Jersey. I'm nervous." I mean, are you nervous because of the election interference, or are you nervous because you're worried that the election is not going to go the way that you want it to go? Okay. Poop Face Killer says, "Who's responsible for the government shutdown?" The Republican Party. The Republican Party is in full control of the government. They have the House, they have the Senate, they have the White House, they have the judiciary, they have everything. They could end the filibuster yesterday and end the shutdown, but they are deciding to keep the government shut down instead. Alrighty, let's see here. Jonah C25 says, "Not true. What do you think I said that was not true, Jonah?" Okay. Joe Padilla says, "When Trump's actually gone, is anybody going to be held accountable?" Um, it depends on how much power we give the Democratic Party. If we give the Democratic Party a lot of power, if we give them a lot of seats in the Senate, a lot of seats in the House, it is much more likely that Donald Trump will face some accountability. The only way that he escapes accountability is if we do not do the work of electing Democrats and unelecting Republicans, or he dies before he is able to suffer any kind of consequences. Let's see here. One best username says, "That's not true. They need Democrat votes." No, that's not true. They could end the filibuster. They could end the filibuster and vote for it with only 50 votes. Forge Betting says, "Jonah is right." Again, Jonah did not say anything specific. He just said not true. Let's see here. Forge Betting says, "Somebody's getting paid, LOL." Yeah, Donald Trump is getting paid billions of dollars through his stupid fucking crypto coin. Okay. Not bad, JP, but is not true. Accurate. All right. Excellent live stream today, everybody. Sorry I'm so prickly. What's up, Lauren? Good to see you again. You missed me being real spicy today, Lauren. So I don't know why my patience is in the fucking gutter today. Do I have anybody who's requested to come up? Kimberlina says it's a reassuring thing that they don't and the filibuster means they are scared that Dems will take back power. That's one potential reason for it. I do know, Lauren. I do know that. All right, everybody, let's get them questions in. Oh yeah. So let's hold on a second while we're waiting for some more comments. Sometimes I like to go over here. Gibby says Russ Vought, Steve Bannon want government shutdown to destabilize the government. That is accurate. There are many motivations for the Republican Party to keep the to keep the government shut down, and that is one of them. It makes their billionaire buddies a lot of money. Okay. Judge extends order barring the Trump administration from firing federal workers during the shutdown. That's some good news there. Forge Betting says, "You think Trump is the top dog or is someone controlling him?" I think it's a combination of things. Forge Betting. I think that Donald Trump is the last say on specific issues, but he is really easy to manipulate. He has exactly zero interest in the nuts and bolts of governing. And so the people who are like younger and smarter and have more gas in the tank, like Russ Vought and Steve Miller and shit like that, they're making unilateral decisions that they then convince Donald Trump were okay. Or if not, then they go, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, sir. You're right, Your Highness. I will reverse that decision immediately." But by much independent reporting, Stephen Miller is the shadow president of the United States right now. Okay, let's see here. Among Llamas is currently at L3 Harris in San Antonio, Texas. They are using funds from the ICBM program. Don't love that. What is L3 Harris in San Antonio? I don't know what that means. Turtle and Ashton says Donald Trump is only there to keep his base in line at this point. That is relatively accurate, I think. Harvey James says Trump is not a Republican. He's hijacked the Republican Party, but for some reason they can't see this. When you say they, do you mean the Republican Party or the Republican voters? Because the Republican Party, they see it. They just don't give a shit. They're either too scared to do anything about it, or they like what Trump is doing and they like being a part of his authoritarian fascist agenda. But if you mean the voters, well, that's what propaganda gets you. Is you have a populace that is open to your propaganda. Verifies TTV says, "Well, I have some thoughts, but you know how politics are. I don't want to seem ridiculous or be taken out of context." No, there's no judgments here. Verifies, especially if somebody asks questions that are in good faith. I give people a lot of leeway so long as they're asking questions in good faith. Isaiah official says, "How do you counter identity politics?" I mean, it's a tough one. It's very powerful. That's the reason why right wing billionaires put so much money into it. I guess I would say that. Um, I guess I would try to just redirect people to the issues where, I understand that you might be upset about Bad Bunny, playing the Super Bowl, but that's not like a Democrat thing. What is a Democrat thing is trying to make sure your healthcare costs don't go up. Shit, maybe stuff like that. Joe Padilla says, "What do you think Obama's thinking about this whole debacle?" I'm sure he's just struggling with how much to be involved because him putting too much effort in could have some negative knock-on effects of like conspiracy theories and people on the far left saying, "Oh no, this we're just it's just the centrist Dems stepping in and trying to take power away from the progressives again," stuff like that. There could be a lot of negatives there, but I'm sure he's worried the same way that everybody's worried. Andrew says, "Do you think if Dems stay back control that they'll forgive and forget to unite people?" No, no, I do not. I've been seeing a lot of currently elected Democrats talking about, you know, um, corporations and agencies as if to say, "I know you're getting away with this right now, but when we were in charge, you will not." And so think about that when you're making these next decisions. Michael Anthony says, "How does the shutdown actually realistically end? They know we have the fellow with the island votes now." I have no idea, Michael, but the more people suffer, the more pressure gets put on politicians to end the shutdown. You know, the Republican Party, hypothetically, theoretically, is as susceptible to public pressure as the Democratic Party. So people just need to start putting that pressure on those Republicans to make sure that their health insurance costs do not skyrocket and go up like 3x. Forge Betting says, "Would you call controlling education, politics, economy, media, Hollywood, and social media fascism?" Is control of education, media, fascism? I would say that, Forge Betting, but are you trying to argue that is what like the Democrats have been up to? Because if so, then that is inaccurate. Let's see here. Sonia Boss says Biden pardons via auto pen are void. Is this true? No, it is not. It is a completely valid thing for politicians to use auto pen. Every politician uses auto pen. Donald Trump uses auto pen. Ted Cruz uses auto pen. It does not make what you are citing any more or less authentic. Among Llama says, "I would agree, host, but the problem is there's no integrity turning a cheek." Um, I'm not really sure if I agree with that, Among Llama. Say more. Say more about that. Right. Rebel says, "Most of our Republican senators and reps don't give a fuck, unfortunately." Rebel, I'm going to say something controversial but brave, but everybody is susceptible. Maybe they are not answering the phone. Maybe they are ignoring your faxes, but you can go to their office. If you see them out at dinner, let them know how you feel. It's a free country. Okay, let's see here. Among Llamas, I think it's taken Republicans and most Americans a long time to fully grasp. So yeah, still say more among Llama. Harvey James says, "Did Trump do a draft 4 or 5 times and rip off a kid's charity?" Yes, 100%. He dodged the draft 5 times and he ripped off a kid's charity. No questions there. All right, verifies TTV says, "I'm a proud American and care about much about my freedom and security, but I feel the world will forever be in conflict until we attempt to come together. Globalism, I guess, but I'm not saying that it would solve everything. I think just as long as we have barriers and conflicting beliefs, we will always have turmoil." Yeah, I don't think that there's any issue to that, verifies TTV. I think that the problem is we need to be treating our borders in the sort of like good faith, fun type of relationship that you have with like other sports teams. Like you don't want to murder the fans of the other sport team or you don't want to murder the players of that sport team, but it's fun to have like rivalries, with those people. The same way that, we can tease the French for being pretentious and the British can tease us for being oafs and stuff like that. I think there's value in protecting, strains of culture, because culture is interesting. I remember going to England in the 90s and it feeling very English, and then going there in the 2000s and in like 2013, and just it feeling like every other city because of globalization. So I agree with you. I think that globalization has its value. I think that there is some value to protecting the uniqueness of various countries and cultures. Not at the sacrifice of being dogmatic about immigration and shit like that. Yeah. I mean, I generally agree with you. Okay, Uncle Hippie said, should everybody involved in blowing up Venezuelan boats be arrested for murder? Yes, I think so. Carmine says, I don't know, man. These people eat tuna with beans. I don't have a problem with that at all. Joe Padilla says, who do you think is going to be our next president? Joe, political predictions are worthless, so I am not even going to venture a guess into that. Okay. Among Llama says their boat is filling with water, but they're too busy pointing a finger and laughing. Interesting. Forge betting. All right. Why do we fund so many other countries when we got enough problems here? So that's it's a really good question, Forge betting. So let me try and answer this in the simplest way that I can, which is that the things that we send money to other countries to help them with are problems that, if we did not send them money, would eventually reach America. And so it is better in the long run for us to send money to other countries for them to solve the problems that could then eventually impact us. Now, does that mean, for example, that we should be sending money and weapons to Ukraine so they can defend themselves against Russia? Absolutely. Does that mean that we should be sending money and weapons to Israel so they can continue to do war crimes and genocide on the people of Palestine? Absolutely not. I think that we should. I think that one of the worst things that Trump and Doge and Elon Musk did was end funding USAID, because that's exactly what that was. It was making sure that diseases and wars and terrorism don't make it to American shores. Forge betting says, so funding Sesame Street in Iran helps us how? By contributing to a culture of freedom away from religious extremism. Let's see here. Yeah, having a an educated younger generation raised on the principles of Sesame Street is advantageous to that country and every country. Okay, Among Llamas says corporate tax rate in the 50s and most of 60s was 63 to 64%. I believe that's accurate. Okay, Forge Betting says you almost laughed trying to say that. I'd much rather it go to our teachers in America. So there's no reason why we can't do both, Forge Betting. The problem is that the billionaire class has hoarded so much money and wealth that we are now all living on shoestring budgets. And if we just tax the wealthy, then we would have exactly as much money as we needed for people to not go hungry, people to afford healthcare here in America, and we could fund USAID overseas. It would just be better for everybody. And Forge Better, I did not almost laugh trying to say the thing that I said. I will watch the tape back and see what it is that you were referring to. Among Llama says, not a Democrat or Republican thing. Corporations are in the pocket of both parties. Yes, but you have to admit that it is worse for Republicans by a lot. Among Llama, do you? You've been with me all day, Among Llama, so please, let's match me here. Forge Betting says it's all just a Ponzi scheme. None of these government fundings are going anywhere but back to billionaires. No, not necessarily. Forge Betting. That's a policy choice. We can make that choice to tax the billionaires and put it into places where it goes to the people and not to billionaires again. There's nothing intrinsic. There's nothing set in stone that says that all government funding eventually goes back to billionaires. Okay, Forge Betting says billionaire are taxed more just for government funding to send money right back to them for I don't know what Prague means, but yeah, that's the Republican Party for you, my guy. But if we replace them with Democrats, then we won't have that anymore. Forge Betting, you ever think about that? Okay. All right. Verifies TV says yes. If we became one entity, culture could suffer. There is a lot of potential nuance to it, but it would truly be complicated to create a world that doesn't have any divisiveness. Yeah. Verifies. I think that I think what you're saying is accurate. I choose to be a little bit more optimistic about it. In that, if we can change the culture, if we can change the narrative to move people away from divisiveness and extremism, then we can have this peaceful, conflict free world that you and I dream of. I don't think we need to be a global nation in order for that to happen. I think we can do it just by being good, chill people, you know? Forge Betting says, I'm not a Republican. LOL. I hate both parties equally. We need less federal government and more central. I don't know what that means. Do you think the Republican and the Democratic Party are equally bad? Forge Betting? Because I think the Republican Party is a lot worse than the Democratic Party, and I'm happy to get into specifics on that with you. User bunch of numbers says, how do you feel about Gavin running? It's fine. Let him run. Forge Betting says, I think it's two sides of a coin. Well, I don't think that bears itself out in the data, Forge Betting. There are people alive today because of the Affordable Care Act, which was a Democrat thing, and there are women who are dead today because of abortion bans, which is a Republican thing. So, there are differences based on who's in charge. Do you not agree with that, Forge Betting? Kimberlina says, thoughts on standard deduction for all versus all the loopholes for yachts, etc., for the rich, or something else. So I'm not prepared, Kimberlina, to make an argument for specific tax policy, but I will just say, let's have a tax code that helps people and takes more money from the rich because the rich have too much and the poor need more. Forge Betting says both parties hate each other and are propagandized to do such, so we fight and don't blame them. And Forge Betting, I agree that we should not be fighting with other voters. But I also think that if we had Democratic politicians, then the government would be running better. And my evidence for that is, for example, the Affordable Care Act, which saved lives, versus abortion bans, which killed women. Can we agree that that is a thing that exists in reality, Forge Betting? Can we agree? Forge Betting says we had that a year ago, though. I don't know what point you're trying to make there, Forge Betting. I can give you 1,000 examples of things that happen under Republican administrations versus Democratic administrations to show that the parties are different and that Democratic administrations are better. So I don't really know where you stand on this issue. Like, what is your evidence that both parties are the same? Let's see here. John Abbott, according to Trump, the CDC is a Democrat program. That alone should be enough to tell people that the parties are not the same. One wants to deal with public health issues, the other one wants us to die. Accurate, John Abbott. Forge Betting says we had Democrats in power and it wasn't good. We had Republicans and it isn't good. Better does not equal good. Yes, but it does equal better. Forge Betting. So yes, the Democrats were in power. But I would argue that it wasn't good. We did not have ICE fucking kidnapping people. We did not have fucking concentration camps. We did not have a fucking trade war. We did not have the government sending the military into American cities and, declaring war on half of the country. Like, there's a massive difference between the two political parties. And I would argue that we would have seen a better 4 years after 4 years of Biden cleaning up the mess of the first Trump administration. Forge Betting says we had an invasion, we had wars, we had inflation, and forced vaccines to keep jobs. Forge Betting, I'm sure it's just every single one of those things is another 30 minutes of explanations, man. So it's like, are you hearing any of the things that among llamas says Democrats are terrible at winning elections, but govern much better, in my opinion only. So I don't agree that Democrats are terrible at winning elections. I think that the structure of the government is weighted against Democrats winning elections. They have less access to money. They have less control over the information environment. Gerrymandering, the Senate map, electoral college, they all give massive advantages to the Republican Party. And the Republican Party is more of a monolith, which makes it easier for them to rally the troops around a single message, whereas the Democratic Party is more of a rainbow coalition. Yeah, I can give you 1,000 examples of this. The game is rigged against Democrats. I think that they are completely fine at winning elections. Cflon says, I'm usually on your side, but sometimes comments throw me off. All right, well, let's get into it, Cflon. You know that I got much love for you. San Juan says, where were the protests against Biden? They existed, you know. Forge Betting says, and I'll call out all the shit Trump has done too. But come on. Yeah, you know, I can give you 1,000 examples of this, my guy. So if you give me one issue, and I will tell you very specifically about the last 4 years, the last 8 years, how Democrats were better on that than Republicans. There are very real consequences to this shit. There were very real things that the Biden administration did to make all of our lives better, only for Trump to come in, throw it all in the garbage, and be making our lives actively worse. Steve says, you can't honestly think Republicans want people to die. You know, Stefan, I think that I'm not talking about the voters. I'm talking about the politicians very specifically. I would say there's a spectrum where some Republicans really do want people to die. Some Republicans are fucking horny as hell for regime change wars and the death penalty, and they don't really give a shit about bombing brown people, stuff like that. You know, there's other Republicans who are just like, yeah, people are gonna die. What are you gonna do? They don't care that people are gonna die. And then, you know, I'm sure that there are some Republicans who do not like it when people die, but are not able to connect the dots between their policies and the senseless death and suffering that they are causing. So if Republicans don't want people to die, if they're not ambivalent about people dying, then why are they on the sidelines during the Trump administration trying to triple everybody's healthcare costs, ending USAID, which has caused millions of deaths, I'm guessing? Yeah, you know, bombing Iran, starting a war in Venezuela, all of these fucking extrajudicial murders that the Trump administration is doing in international waters. Like, where are the Republican politicians speaking out against that? If they have any feelings at all about human suffering and people dying. Okay. Yeah, Forge Betting. I'm still waiting for you, my guy. Let me know what's going on, my man. All right, everybody, we are at about an hour, so we're gonna start wrapping things up. I want to thank everybody for being here. I know that I didn't agree with everybody, but that's totally fine. Like, I prefer that. I prefer to have people that I'm potentially pushing in one direction or another, and we can all start maybe, you know, living in a shared reality instead of everybody having a completely different idea about what's going on. Yeah, Forge Betting, give me an issue, man. We can do this before I leave. I guarantee you, we can handle it. What else? Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Tomorrow we're doing a special show at 3:30 Pacific time instead of 11:30 Pacific time. If you're a regular, I hope you can join me then. Or if not, maybe we will just meet some new people and get some new fans. I am excited about the possibility of meeting some new people at the new time. Let's see here. If you have any questions I was not able to get to on this live stream, DMs are open, and I encourage you to get in touch any way that you like. I want to be a resource for you guys. So if there are things that I can do to help point you in the right direction, give you some accurate information, get you involved with an organization that is doing great work to help people right now, I want to be that resource for you. So please do not be afraid. Do not be shy about reaching out. Use me and abuse me. Use me until I am all used up. Forge Betting says, why didn't any invasions happen under Trump, but they did under Biden, Russia, and Gaza? Forge Betting, that is an excellent question. You know, yeah, let me finish my outro and then I'll get to that. Lemmy Gardenmeister says, when are you going on tour again? Not for over a year, actually, because my wife is pregnant and we are expecting next year, and my boss's wife is also pregnant, and so the pregnancies unfortunately don't line up in a way that is making it easy for me to go back on the road. But I will be back on the road in a little over a year, December of 2026, December 2026. Okay. Let's see here. If you guys want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I know that we're all struggling. I have a Patreon that you can join for as little as $1 a month. I have a store that you can buy things from. Link is in the bio. And also, you can send gifts and become super subscribers and shit like that on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube. and all the various streaming things. Verifies TTV. I'm glad that you're here. I hope that you give me a follow, my guy. Okay. Mm-mm-mm. All right. And lastly, I just really hope that you guys do the work because it is only us doing the work that is going to get us out of this mess. Daniel D says, why isn't the Supreme Court doing their jobs against atrocities being committed by Donald Trump? Because Donald Trump gave a third of them their jobs. And so they are beholden to him. The Supreme Court is an extremely far right organization today because of the judges that have been set. These are judges that have been handpicked by the Federalist Society to be right-wing stooges for the Republican Party. And it is one of many reasons why we should be voting against the Republican Party, because they put this together. They made this happen. Okay. Forge betting, will you send me a DM about this invasions question? Because I just want to make sure I'm getting all my facts right. I haven't answered that one in a really long time. That one was a little bit more friend of mine last year when I was doing these live streams, but now I want to make sure what I'm saying is accurate. So yeah, send me a DM, Forge betting. Let me know. He had the opportunity to mention his 2019 Animal Cruelty Act. Donald had the perfect opportunity to mention one during the presidential debates. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Joe Padilla says, has Trump done anything good? So this will be the last question that I answer. We could siphon through the mountain of shit that is the two terms of the Trump administration, like 1 1/4 right now of the Trump administrations. And I know that some people want that. Some people want to hear the sort of like the pros and cons of both sides from their political commentators, so that we can prove that we are not biased and that we are judging things accurately. We're just calling balls and strikes, shit like that. But I would argue that when a politician does as much damage and as much wrong as Trump has, I don't think it's valuable to try to find the good, because what are we doing? Like somebody stabs you in the chest, and during your deposition, you have to start off by being like, he had really nice eyes. Like, I have to admit that he had really nice eyes. Like, do I think that getting rid of the penny is a good idea? Sure. But goddamn, there is just so much wrong with what Trump has done in his first term, during Biden's term, now in this second term. Like what the fuck are we doing here, guys? Like, we're really gonna give him kudos for the penny after all this fucking shit? Like, just the fact that he has a crypto coin is like one of the most wildly corrupt things that a president has ever done in American history. Anyways, all right, everybody, I'm tired. I will see you guys tomorrow at 3:30 instead of at the usual time, 3:30 Pacific time. So maybe you can join me for then. Otherwise, you'll have to catch me back on Thursday at the regular time. Be good to each other. Do the work. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Same bat channel, different bat time. All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.